The evening had arrived with a kind of glittering excitement that could be felt even before stepping into the grand hall. The mansion was enormous, with high ceilings and crystal chandeliers that reflected light in 1,000 tiny prisms across the polished marble floors. Outside, cars lined the long driveway, their headlights cutting through the early night. Guests arrived in sleek dresses and tailored suits, laughing and chatting, carrying glasses of champagne. There was a hum of energy, the kind that comes from anticipation, luxury, and the promise of something remarkable. In the midst of all this, moving quietly among the guests, was a young waitress. She had been hired a few days earlier to help with the party, and tonight was her first real experience in such a grand setting. Her uniform was neat and simple, black and white, and she carried a tray filled with sparkling glasses. She tried to keep herself invisible, moving from group to group, careful not to bump into anyone or draw too much attention. The guests barely noticed her, and that was just the way she liked it. She had grown up in a small town where life was quiet, predictable, and often tough. Her family had always emphasized hard work and humility. From a young age, she had learned to stay out of the spotlight, to help without expecting praise. This had shaped her into someone observant and careful, someone who could read a room without needing to speak much. She knew that the people at this party were very different from the friends and neighbors she was used to. Their world was loud, flashy, and full of energy, and she felt a mixture of awe and nervousness just being there. The mansion itself seemed alive with movement. Waiters and waitresses scurried about, balancing trays of food and drinks, while the host, a man known for his wealth and flamboyant parties, circulated among the guests with a wide smile. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his manner confident and commanding, and he seemed to thrive on the attention of everyone around him. The young waitress noticed how easily he drew people in, how every eye in the room followed him whenever he moved. She wondered what it must be like to carry that kind of presence, to be the center of attention and feel completely at ease in a room filled with strangers. She focused on her work, pouring drinks, taking orders, and making sure the guests had everything they needed. Her movements were careful and precise, and she had learned quickly how to navigate the crowded space without causing spills or interruptions. Despite her nerves, there was a calmness in her approach, a quiet confidence that came from years of practice in smaller jobs. She knew that in situations like this, it was important to stay alert and ready for anything. As the night progressed, the music in the background grew louder. A string quartet had been hired to play soft melodies, and their notes floated across the room, adding a gentle elegance to the bustling energy. Guests clinked glasses, laughed at jokes, and shared stories, their voices mixing with the music to create a rich tapestry of sound. The young waitress moved among them, careful to offer refills and respond politely when thanked, though most people barely looked at her, absorbed in their own conversations and the spectacle of the evening. She had always loved music, though it had been a private passion. Growing up, she had spent hours at a small piano in her home, teaching herself to play and experimenting with melodies. Music had been her refuge, a place where she could express herself without words, where she could create something beautiful even when the world around her felt ordinary or challenging. She never expected anyone to hear her play, certainly not in a place like this, where the focus was on wealth, appearances, and social games. Yet tonight, something about the grand piano in the corner of the room caught her eye. It was large and elegant, its polished surface gleaming under the lights, and it seemed to call to her. She felt a strange pull, a tiny spark of curiosity and longing. She shook her head slightly, telling herself to focus on her work. This was not the time or the place for personal indulgence. Her role was clear: serve the guests, stay out of sight, and do her job well. Despite her resolve, she couldn't completely ignore the piano. She found herself glancing at it whenever she moved through the room. It was as if it were waiting for someone, though she couldn't have guessed that she would be that someone. The host had not yet noticed her, and for the moment, she could remain in the background, an observer rather than a participant. But even from afar, she sensed that the energy in the room was building, that something unexpected could happen at any moment. The guests were enjoying themselves, unaware of the quiet tension that can arise in such settings. Parties like this were performances in themselves, a combination of spectacle, social maneuvering, and display. Everyone had their role. The host orchestrated, the guests admired and entertained, and the staff moved in a carefully choreographed rhythm, unseen but essential. The young waitress felt the weight of her own invisibility, but she also felt a strange comfort in it. She was part of the evening, yet separate, safe yet on the edge of something unknown. As the first hour passed, she noticed the host moving toward her. His smile was broad, almost teasing, and she instinctively straightened, preparing herself for attention she hadn't expected. He spoke to her briefly, asking a question about her experience and complimenting her efficiency. She replied politely, her voice soft but steady, and felt a flicker of pride. Even in a room full of people more powerful and wealthier than her, she had maintained her composure. The conversation was short, but it left her with a heightened awareness. She sensed that the host was looking for something more, something unexpected. She couldn't have known what was coming, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation in the way he moved back toward the center of the room, drawing the attention of the guests. Laughter and chatter resumed around her, but the air seemed charged with possibility, as if the next moment could shift everything. She returned to her work, though her hands felt slightly lighter, almost restless. Her mind wandered briefly to the piano again, imagining the feel of the keys under her fingers and the sound filling the room. She shook herself slightly, reminding herself that this was not the time for daydreams. She had responsibilities and she had to focus. Still, the music, even imagined, brought a calmness and confidence she couldn't find anywhere else in the crowded, glittering hall. The party continued to unfold, each moment layered with social nuances, subtle gestures, and the constant flow of conversation. She navigated the space carefully, aware of the delicate balance required to serve well without drawing attention. Guests laughed and moved in groups, exchanging stories of travel, business, and social exploits, while the host made sure everyone remained entertained. In this world of opulence and spectacle, the young waitress remained a quiet observer, attuned to every detail and prepared for whatever might come next. Little did she know, the evening was about to take a turn. Something was brewing that would shift her role from a background figure to the center of attention in a way she never expected. For now, she continued to serve with grace, moving between the guests with a tray in hand, her thoughts occasionally drifting to the piano and the music that lived inside her. She was ready, though she did not yet know for what. As the evening progressed, the energy in the mansion grew livelier. Guests wandered between rooms, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings, glasses clinking as champagne flowed freely. The young waitress continued her careful work, balancing trays with precision, moving gracefully between groups, always keeping her eyes alert and her movements smooth. She felt the rhythm of the room like a second skin, sensing when someone needed a refill or a small favor, always ready, always attentive. Suddenly, the host's eyes landed on her again. He was walking through the crowd with his usual confident stride, his attention catching on the waitress in a way that made her stomach twist with uncertainty. She tried to remain invisible, but she knew that once he had noticed her, there was no escaping his gaze. The guests around them barely noticed the interaction, but she felt it sharply, as if the air had shifted and all the lights in the room now pointed at her. He approached her with a smile that seemed harmless enough, but there was a spark of mischief in his eyes. He leaned slightly toward her and spoke in a tone that was louder than necessary, making sure the nearby guests could hear. "You've been running around all evening, but I have a little challenge for you," he said. She blinked, unsure what he meant. The words seemed light, but there was an edge to them, a sense of expectation that made her heart beat faster. The host gestured toward the grand piano in the corner of the room, its polished surface gleaming under the soft lighting. "Why don't you play for us? Just for fun," he said, his tone teasing. There were a few chuckles from nearby guests, and she realized immediately that this was meant to be a spectacle, a moment for everyone to watch her potentially stumble or fail. The thought made her nervous, a cold tension spreading through her. Her hands, which had been steady all evening, felt suddenly unsteady. She had always loved playing the piano, but never in front of an audience like this, especially one filled with strangers who expected her to falter. She hesitated, glancing at the instrument, imagining the keys beneath her fingers, the sound that she could create if given the chance. Her mind raced with doubt, but deep inside, a small spark of determination flickered. She had faced challenges before, though none like this, and she knew that backing down would leave her with regret. The host noticed her hesitation and leaned back, a playful smirk on his face. "Come on, don't be shy. Just a little music. Let's see what you've got," he said, his voice carrying across the room. Some of the guests turned to look, their curiosity piqued. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd as more people became aware that something unusual was about to happen. The young waitress felt every eye on her, the weight of expectation pressing down like a physical force. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Memories of her childhood and the hours she had spent at the piano surfaced in her mind. She remembered the way her fingers had moved over the keys effortlessly, how music had always been a place of comfort and expression for her. She realized that this was an opportunity, not just a challenge, and that the fear in her chest could be transformed into energy for her performance. She straightened, nodded politely to the host, and began to move toward the piano. The guests watched as she approached the instrument, some with amusement, others with curiosity. A few raised eyebrows, clearly not expecting much, while others simply waited, intrigued by the unfolding scene. The atmosphere shifted subtly. The chatter quieted, replaced by a low murmur of anticipation. The young waitress felt her pulse quicken, but she also felt a strange sense of focus settle over her. The room seemed to narrow, the lights, the guests, even the host himself fading slightly into the background. All that remained was her and the piano. She reached the instrument and lifted the lid, revealing the keys that had been calling to her all evening. She paused for a moment, placing her hands lightly on the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers. She could hear the soft resonance of the strings as she tested a note, a single, clear sound that echoed in the hall. It was enough to remind her of her abilities, enough to spark confidence. She inhaled slowly, centering herself, and then began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative yet precise. She felt the music flowing through her, each note building into the next, forming a melody that was both delicate and powerful. The guests were silent now, their laughter and chatter replaced by focused attention. Even the host, who had been expecting a simple performance or a moment of embarrassment, found himself leaning forward, captivated by the sound. The room seemed to hold its breath, every ear attuned to the music that was filling the space. As she continued, the music grew richer, more confident, and the melody began to wrap around the audience, drawing them in. The initial tension she had felt melted away, replaced by a natural rhythm and grace that seemed to come from deep within her. She moved effortlessly from note to note, her fingers dancing across the keys with a fluidity that suggested years of unseen practice and dedication. The guests, who had only moments ago expected a light-hearted spectacle, were now mesmerized, their expressions shifting from curiosity to genuine awe. The young waitress played with emotion, each phrase carrying a story of quiet determination, hidden talent, and personal triumph. The contrast between her modest appearance and the brilliance of her music added to the impact, making the performance even more striking. She felt herself becoming lost in the music, aware of the audience but not distracted by them, fully immersed in the creation of something beautiful. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice for her emotions, a way to communicate without words. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room remained silent for a brief moment, the audience collectively absorbing the experience. Then, as if released from a spell, the guests erupted into applause, some standing to show their admiration. Whispers of amazement traveled quickly from one group to another, spreading through the room like wildfire. The host himself looked stunned, momentarily speechless, his smirk replaced by a look of genuine surprise and respect. The young waitress lowered her hands from the keys, her heart racing but her expression calm. She had done what she feared, and the result was beyond anything she could have imagined. The applause continued, and she felt a warm sense of accomplishment mixed with relief. The guests approached, offering compliments, some even expressing disbelief that such talent had been hidden behind the quiet figure of a waitress. She nodded and smiled politely, feeling the weight of attention but handling it with the same grace she had shown all evening. The host finally regained his composure, approaching her with a mixture of admiration and a touch of embarrassment. He complimented her skill, acknowledging that he had underestimated her. The young waitress listened quietly, accepting the praise with humility, aware that this moment had shifted the dynamic of the entire evening. The laughter and casual chatter returned, but now with a sense of respect and appreciation for the unexpected brilliance that had been revealed. The performance had not only captivated the guests but had also changed the way they saw her. No longer just a background figure, she had stepped into the spotlight and shown a depth of talent and courage that left a lasting impression. She realized that her quiet strength, her dedication, and her willingness to embrace a challenge had opened a door to possibilities she had never considered. The room, once filled with social games and superficial interactions, had become a place where genuine talent and human connection could shine. As the party continued, she returned to her duties, but the energy around her had shifted. Guests approached her with renewed interest, some asking questions, others simply expressing admiration. She moved with confidence now, aware that she had proven something not just to the crowd but to herself. The music had been a bridge between her inner world and the external one, a way to show that even in the most unexpected places, talent and courage could leave a mark. The evening, once daunting and overwhelming, had become a defining moment, one that would remain with her long after the last guest had left. The moment she sat down at the piano, a quiet determination settled over her. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their smooth surface under her fingertips. There was a brief pause as she collected her thoughts, inhaling slowly to calm the fluttering in her chest. The room seemed to hold its breath, the soft murmurs of guests fading as all attention turned to her. She could feel the weight of their eyes, but she reminded herself that the piano had always been her refuge, her place to create something beyond words. Her first notes were soft, almost hesitant, yet they carried a clarity that immediately drew the audience in. The melody began simply, with a gentle rise and fall, but each note was deliberate, precise, and confident. She let herself sink into the music, feeling it flow naturally from her heart to her fingers. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier melted into focus, and the room seemed to fade around her, leaving only the connection between her and the piano. As she continued, the music became more complex. Her fingers moved fluidly, dancing over the keys, shaping harmonies and intricate patterns that the guests had not expected. Whispers rippled through the crowd as they realized that this was no ordinary performance. Her skill was evident, each note perfectly executed, each chord carrying depth and emotion. Even the host, who had initially intended the challenge as a joke, found himself leaning forward, astonished by her ability. She played with passion, allowing herself to express emotions she had kept hidden for years. The piano became a voice for her courage, her hopes, and the quiet strength that had carried her through life. The melody swelled, rising and falling with a rhythm that captivated everyone in the room. Guests who had been casually mingling moments before now stood still, transfixed by the brilliance of the performance. It was as if the music had woven an invisible thread connecting each listener, drawing them into her world. Time seemed to stretch and bend as she continued. She moved effortlessly from one phrase to another, her fingers guided by instinct and experience. Each chord was deliberate, each transition smooth, creating a seamless flow that left the audience mesmerized. The initial skepticism that had greeted her challenge dissolved entirely, replaced by awe and admiration. Even those who had expected her to falter could not deny the talent unfolding before them. She noticed the subtle reactions around the room. Some guests had their hands over their mouths in disbelief. Others were whispering to neighbors, trying to process what they were hearing. The host, whose expression had shifted from amusement to astonishment, could no longer maintain his playful demeanor. There was a humility in his gaze now, an acknowledgement that he had misjudged her. The young waitress, focused entirely on her music, felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had surpassed expectations. The melody took on a more emotional tone, each note imbued with feeling. She drew upon memories of her childhood, the quiet moments at home where music had been her companion. Those experiences lent depth to her playing, making it resonate even more with the audience. The contrast between her modest appearance and the power of her performance only heightened the impact. The room, once filled with laughter and chatter, was now a space of reverence and silent admiration. She allowed herself a brief moment to glance at the host, who was watching intently, his eyes wide with surprise. It was clear that he had underestimated her, and the realization seemed to humble him. Yet there was also a sense of respect, an understanding that her talent was genuine and extraordinary. She felt no need to respond to his gaze. Her music was her statement, her way of communicating without words. The performance continued to evolve, moving through delicate passages and bold, confident phrases. She experimented with dynamics, shifting from soft, tender notes to powerful, resonant chords that filled the room. The guests were swept along by the ebb and flow of the music, caught in the spell of her skill and expression. Each transition was seamless, each moment crafted with care, demonstrating a mastery that seemed effortless yet was the result of years of practice and dedication. As the final notes approached, she allowed the melody to linger, letting the last chord resonate fully before slowly lifting her hands from the keys. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, the air thick with anticipation and awe. Then, like a sudden release, the guests erupted into applause. Some stood, clapping enthusiastically, while others cheered and whistled, unable to contain their admiration. The sound was overwhelming, yet she remained composed, accepting the recognition with quiet grace. The host approached her, a mixture of surprise, admiration, and a hint of embarrassment on his face. He complimented her skill, acknowledging that he had been wrong to assume this would be a mere amusement. She smiled politely, feeling a sense of pride but maintaining her humility. She had faced the challenge, embraced the fear, and emerged not just unscathed but celebrated. The moment was transformative, a turning point that revealed her hidden talent to a world that had not known it existed. Guests continued to speak in hushed tones, praising her performance and expressing disbelief that such talent could come from someone so unassuming. Conversations buzzed with excitement, and several people approached her, eager to know more about her experience and background. She listened politely, answering with modesty, aware that her music had left a lasting impression. The room, once dominated by social games and superficial interactions, had become a space of genuine appreciation for skill and courage. The young waitress returned to her duties after a while, but the atmosphere around her had changed. She was no longer invisible. She had captured the attention and respect of everyone in the room. Guests who had overlooked her before now regarded her with admiration, some even asking if she had formal training or professional experience. She moved with newfound confidence, aware that her life had shifted in subtle but meaningful ways in the span of a single performance. As the evening wore on, she reflected quietly on what had happened. The challenge, which had initially seemed daunting and intimidating, had become an opportunity to reveal a side of herself that few had ever seen. The music had allowed her to connect with the audience in a way words could not, bridging gaps between social status, expectation, and personal identity. She realized that courage, combined with talent, could transform even the most unlikely moments into something extraordinary. The applause still echoed in her mind as she continued to work, serving drinks and attending to guests with ease. She felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had faced a moment of fear and turned it into triumph. The experience had not only showcased her abilities, but had also reminded her of the power of belief in oneself. Even in a room full of strangers and skeptics, she had found her voice and shared it with confidence. By the end of the night, the young waitress had become a central figure in the party's story. Guests continued to discuss her performance long after it ended, some returning to thank her personally, others simply exchanging glances of admiration. She had stepped out of the background and into a space where her talent could shine, leaving an impression that would linger far beyond the evening itself. In that moment, she understood that sometimes, the most unexpected opportunities could reveal the deepest strengths within us, and that bravery, paired with skill, could create moments of unforgettable brilliance. The applause had barely settled when the young waitress felt a surge of energy and confidence. The music she had played was still alive in the room, its echoes lingering in the ears and hearts of the guests. They were no longer just onlookers. They were witnesses to something extraordinary, a glimpse of hidden brilliance that had emerged unexpectedly. She took a moment to breathe, feeling the smooth surface of the piano keys beneath her fingertips, knowing that what she had just created had changed the atmosphere completely. Guests were whispering among themselves, many still stunned by the depth of her talent. Some had initially expected a clumsy performance or a light-hearted joke, and the reality of what they had heard was astonishing. Conversations buzzed with admiration, with people trying to express their surprise at how someone so unassuming could possess such skill. Even those who had been joking about her moments before now found themselves silent, struggling to find words for the music that had captivated them. The host, who had set the challenge, stood nearby, visibly shaken by the display of talent. His usual playful demeanor was gone, replaced by a quiet respect. He realized that he had underestimated her, and there was a subtle shift in his posture, a humility that had not been there moments ago. The young waitress noticed this, though she did not need acknowledgement from him to know the power of her performance. She had felt the music flow through her and into the room, and that alone was reward enough. Several guests approached her, eager to speak, their faces glowing with amazement. They asked questions about her experience, how long she had been playing, and whether she had formal training. She answered modestly, her voice calm and steady, explaining that she had practiced privately for years. They listened intently, their admiration clear, some shaking their heads in disbelief at how such talent could remain hidden for so long. The atmosphere in the room had changed completely. What had begun as a glamorous social gathering with laughter and casual conversation had transformed into a space of awe and appreciation for true skill. Guests moved closer to the piano, some standing quietly to hear the fading notes in their minds, while others whispered excitedly about what they had just witnessed. The young waitress remained composed, her hands resting lightly on the keys, aware that she had left a lasting impression. She felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. The fear she had experienced moments before had been replaced by a sense of triumph. She had taken a chance, faced the challenge, and turned it into a moment of undeniable success. The music had become a bridge between her world and the world of the guests, connecting them through emotion and shared experience. She realized that talent, when combined with courage, could change perceptions instantly. The host finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual, but filled with sincerity. He complimented her skill, acknowledging that he had been wrong to underestimate her. There was a sense of apology in his tone, but it was also recognition of her talent. She smiled politely, accepting the praise with humility, aware that her actions had spoken louder than any words. The moment was not about proving anyone wrong, but about sharing something beautiful that had been hidden until now. Guests continued to approach her throughout the evening. Some offered enthusiastic congratulations, while others expressed curiosity about where she had learned to play. She listened attentively, answering with grace and modesty, aware that her performance had sparked genuine admiration. The whispers of amazement spread quickly, reaching even those who had not been near the piano, and the story of her talent began to circulate among the guests like wildfire. The young waitress found herself noticing subtle changes in the way people treated her. Where she had previously been overlooked, she was now acknowledged and respected. Guests who had barely noticed her before now sought her attention, eager to hear her speak, to understand her story. The shift in perception was powerful and immediate, and she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The music had not only showcased her skill, but had also changed the way she was seen by those around her. She returned to her duties, but the room felt different now. The energy was warmer, more attentive, and full of admiration. Guests approached with smiles, offering thanks and expressing astonishment at the talent they had just witnessed. The young waitress moved among them with confidence, aware of the impact she had made. Each interaction was infused with respect and curiosity, a stark contrast to the casual indifference of earlier moments. As the evening progressed, she had the opportunity to observe the subtle ways in which people responded to her performance. Some were inspired, others were reflective, and many simply marveled at the unexpected brilliance they had seen. The experience reinforced her belief in the power of courage and skill, showing her that even the most unlikely moments could become transformative. She felt proud, not for herself alone, but for the music and the emotions it had conveyed to everyone in the room. She also noticed the host, who had returned to his guests but seemed thoughtful, occasionally glancing toward her with renewed respect. It was clear that he had learned something about underestimating people based on appearances and had gained an appreciation for the depth of talent that could be found in unexpected places. The young waitress, focused on her work, observed him with quiet acknowledgement, understanding that her performance had left a lasting impact. Throughout the night, she continued to serve with precision and grace, but her confidence had grown. The earlier tension and fear were gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and satisfaction. The piano, once a distant and intimidating presence, had become a symbol of her courage and ability. She felt connected to the music in a way that was deeply personal, yet also shared with everyone around her. As the guests began to leave, many expressed their gratitude and admiration once again. Some asked if she would play for them in future events, while others simply shook their heads in wonder, amazed by what they had witnessed. She listened with humility, responding politely, and felt a quiet joy in knowing that she had made a meaningful impression. The evening had begun as a typical high-profile party but had transformed into a celebration of unexpected talent and the power of taking a chance. By the time the last guests departed, the young waitress felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond the applause and compliments. She had faced a challenge, embraced it, and revealed a side of herself that few had ever seen. The experience had changed not only the way others viewed her but also the way she viewed herself. She had discovered that courage and talent, when combined, could create moments of lasting impact and genuine connection. As she cleaned up and prepared to leave, she reflected on the night. The performance had been more than just a display of skill. It had been a turning point, a moment where her hidden abilities had been recognized and celebrated. She understood that this was only the beginning, that her courage to step forward had opened doors she had never imagined. The music, the attention, and the admiration were not just rewards but reminders of the strength she carried within herself. The evening had shown her that even in the most unexpected circumstances, true talent and bravery could shine brightly, leaving a lasting impression on everyone fortunate enough to witness it. The evening had settled into a quiet rhythm after the performance, but the young waitress could feel the lingering energy in the room. Guests were still talking about what they had heard, sharing whispers of astonishment and admiration. The piano, once a distant fixture in the corner, had become the center of attention, a symbol of the unexpected brilliance that had just been revealed. She moved among the guests, serving drinks and responding to polite comments, but she carried a quiet sense of pride and fulfillment. She knew she had done something remarkable, something that would not be easily forgotten. People approached her more freely now, no longer treating her as just a server. Some complimented her skill directly, their voices filled with genuine admiration. Others asked questions about her background, how long she had been playing, and whether she had formal training. She answered modestly, explaining that she had spent years practicing quietly, away from public attention. The guests listened intently, fascinated by the story behind the music. Their reactions were warm and encouraging, a stark contrast to the casual indifference she had experienced earlier in the evening. The host, who had initially intended to set up a playful challenge, now approached her with a more serious expression. His previous amusement had been replaced by respect. "I didn't expect that," he said sincerely. "You've amazed everyone tonight. That was incredible." She smiled politely, acknowledging his words without letting them distract her from her responsibilities. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her talent had spoken for itself, without any need for showmanship or explanation. As the night went on, other guests continued to express their appreciation. Some asked if she would perform at future gatherings, while others simply nodded, still marveling at what they had witnessed. She responded with humility, grateful for the recognition but remaining grounded. The experience had not only showcased her skill but had also affirmed her confidence in herself. She realized that she had stepped into a space she had never imagined for herself and had succeeded beyond her own expectations. She noticed the subtle changes in the way people treated her. Where she had been invisible before, she was now acknowledged and respected. Guests who had barely noticed her earlier now sought her attention, eager to learn more about her and her music. This shift was not just external, it affected how she felt about herself. She had faced a moment of fear and uncertainty and had emerged triumphant, proving to herself that courage and preparation could create extraordinary results. The music she had played seemed to linger in the minds of the guests, and she could see it reflected in their expressions. Some were clearly moved, others thoughtful, and many simply impressed. The applause, though no longer ongoing, had left a mark, a sense of shared experience that connected the audience with her in a subtle but powerful way. She realized that the performance had not just been about playing the piano. It had been about expressing something deeply human, something that transcended status or expectation. Throughout the evening, she returned to her duties with ease, now carrying herself with a quiet confidence. She served drinks and attended to the needs of the guests, but her presence was different. She was no longer just a background figure. She was someone who had left a lasting impression. Each interaction carried a new energy, a sense of mutual respect and acknowledgement. The atmosphere of the party had shifted subtly, infused with a sense of wonder and appreciation for the talent that had been revealed. The host observed her for a while, occasionally nodding or offering a small smile. There was a recognition in his eyes that he had underestimated her, but also an understanding of the power of unexpected skill. He had intended a light-hearted moment, but it had become something much more meaningful. The young waitress, focused on her work, noticed this but did not seek to draw attention to it. She allowed the music and her actions to speak for themselves, knowing that the impact had already been made. Other staff members, who had been observing quietly, also seemed impressed. Some had exchanged glances, whispering about the performance, while others approached her privately to express admiration. She felt a sense of camaraderie with them, a shared recognition of how a single act of courage could elevate an entire evening. The experience had not only changed the perception of the guests but had also affected those around her, creating a ripple effect of respect and admiration. As the night progressed, she took a moment to reflect on what had happened. The challenge that had initially seemed intimidating had become an opportunity to showcase her abilities and connect with people in a meaningful way. She realized that fear often masks potential, and that stepping forward, even when uncertain, could lead to moments of triumph. The music had been her voice, a way to communicate her skill, her dedication, and her courage without needing words. She noticed the smiles and nods of approval from various guests, each one reinforcing the idea that her efforts had made a difference. The applause and compliments were gratifying, but what mattered most was the realization that she had met a challenge head-on and succeeded. The experience had changed not only the way others saw her, but also the way she saw herself. She had proven that talent and bravery, combined with preparation, could create moments of undeniable impact. Even after the performance, the guests continued to discuss what they had seen. Some were clearly inspired, others reflective, and many simply impressed by the unexpected brilliance. She listened politely to their comments, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The music had created a connection, a shared experience that transcended social boundaries and left a lasting impression. She realized that her performance had not only been about entertainment, but also about revealing a part of herself that few had ever seen. As the party began to wind down, the young waitress felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced a daunting situation and had turned it into an opportunity for growth and recognition. The evening had transformed from a typical high-profile party into a celebration of talent, courage, and the power of stepping forward when called upon. She understood that her actions had created a memorable experience for everyone present, one that would be remembered long after the last guest had left. The host approached her once more before the evening ended, offering a final compliment. "You've truly surprised us all," he said. "That was a performance to remember." She smiled, feeling the weight of his words, and thanked him quietly. She had done more than just play the piano. She had left an impression that extended beyond music, demonstrating resilience, talent, and grace under pressure. As the guests departed, many offered thanks and praise once again. She continued to serve until the last person had left, but the sense of achievement remained. The experience had changed her, reinforcing the belief that courage and skill could open doors to new opportunities and recognition. She felt proud of what she had accomplished and grateful for the chance to reveal a hidden part of herself in such a public and meaningful way. When the final guests had left and the mansion grew quiet, she took a moment to reflect. The night had been transformative, a turning point in how she viewed herself and how others viewed her. The piano, once just an instrument, had become a symbol of her abilities and courage. She realized that this experience would stay with her, a reminder that stepping into the unknown with confidence and skill could create moments of lasting impact and personal triumph. The evening had proven that even in the most unexpected circumstances, talent and bravery could shine, leaving a mark that would be remembered long after the music had ended. The party had finally come to an end, the last guests bidding their goodbyes and the mansion growing quiet in the aftermath of laughter, music, and celebration. The young waitress stood for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had entered the evening expecting to perform a simple role, one of service and invisibility, and had instead discovered an entirely new side of herself. The performance had not only revealed her hidden talent but had changed the way everyone in the room, including herself, perceived her. As she walked through the grand hall, her hands lightly touching the polished surfaces of tables and counters, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Her love for music had always been a quiet companion, a private refuge in her life. She had practiced for years in solitude, honing her skills without expectation or recognition. Yet tonight, in this unexpected setting, her dedication had found an audience, one that could appreciate and understand the depth of her talent. It was a moment that validated years of hard work and quiet perseverance. The host, now relaxed and thoughtful after the earlier surprise, approached her once more. "You've made this evening unforgettable," he said sincerely, his tone free of jest. She smiled, appreciating the acknowledgement but not needing further praise to feel accomplished. Her music had spoken for itself, leaving a lasting impression that words could not fully capture. She felt a quiet pride in knowing that she had met the challenge with courage and grace. Guests who lingered were still discussing the performance, some replaying the melody in their minds, others expressing awe at the unexpected brilliance of someone they had barely noticed before. The atmosphere of the mansion had shifted from superficial glamour to genuine appreciation. The young waitress realized that her actions had created a connection, a shared experience that transcended social boundaries. People were no longer focused on status or appearance. They were focused on the music and through it, on her. She moved to the side of the room to gather her belongings, reflecting on the ripple effect of the evening. Even the staff, who had initially viewed the performance as a minor event, now treated her with newfound respect. Some exchanged quiet glances, nodding in acknowledgement of the courage it took to step forward. Others approached with subtle compliments, recognizing that her talent and composure had elevated the entire atmosphere of the party. The young waitress felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only entertained but had inspired. As she walked toward the exit, she passed the grand piano once more, its keys glinting softly under the fading lights. She felt a gentle pang of longing, a desire to sit down and play again, to let the music flow through her without interruption. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be other opportunities to share her gift, other moments to transform fear into triumph. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a symbol of her potential, a reminder of what she could accomplish when she embraced her abilities fully. Outside, The night air was cool and crisp. The driveway was quiet, the cars gone, and the last of the guests departing. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling the freedom and calm after the intensity of the evening. Her thoughts wandered to the journey that lay ahead. She realized that her talent, once hidden and private, now had the chance to reach a wider audience. Opportunities she had never imagined could arise. Doors that had seemed closed were now open. The evening had changed everything. The young waitress reflected on the lessons she had learned. Fear, she realized, was often the barrier between potential and achievement. Courage, even in small doses, could transform a daunting moment into one of triumph. The music she had played had been a bridge, connecting her inner world to the hearts and minds of the guests. In that connection, she found both validation and inspiration. She understood that every moment of practice, every hour spent alone at the piano, had led her to this point. Back in the mansion, the staff was cleaning and preparing to leave, but the memory of the performance lingered in every corner. The laughter and conversation that had filled the halls were replaced by a quiet reflection on what had just transpired. Even the host, known for his extravagant gatherings, seemed humbled by the unexpected display of talent. He had intended to provoke a moment of amusement, but instead, he had witnessed a display of skill and courage that left a lasting impression. The young waitress gathered her things and prepared to leave, her thoughts filled with the possibilities that lay ahead. She knew that the performance had not only showcased her talent, but had also taught her about the power of self-belief. The evening had transformed her, instilling a sense of confidence that would stay with her long after the last note had faded. She felt ready to embrace new opportunities, to share her music with the world, and to continue growing both as a performer and as a person. As she stepped out into the quiet night, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The piano had been her silent companion for years, a source of comfort and expression, and tonight it had become the medium through which she could reveal her inner strength. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was courage, preparation, and the willingness to take a chance that had made the moment truly unforgettable. She walked away from the mansion with a sense of accomplishment and hope. The applause and admiration of the guests would remain with her, a reminder of what could be achieved when fear is met with courage and skill. She understood that this was just the beginning, that her journey as a musician and as a person was only starting to unfold. The evening had shown her that even in the most unexpected circumstances, one could shine brightly, leaving a lasting mark on those fortunate enough to witness it. The night sky stretched above her, filled with stars that seemed to mirror the sense of possibility within her. She felt a quiet exhilaration, knowing that the courage to step forward had opened doors she had never imagined. The music had been her voice, her way of sharing a piece of herself with the world, and it had resonated far beyond her expectations. She walked on with determination, ready to embrace the opportunities that lay ahead, confident in her ability to face challenges and shine in moments that mattered. As the mansion receded in the distance, she thought about the impact of a single performance, how one act of bravery could change perceptions, inspire others, and redefine the possibilities of her own life. She knew that her journey was far from over, but the experience had given her a foundation of confidence and recognition that would carry her forward. The music, the applause, and the admiration of the guests had revealed her potential, and she was determined to continue growing, creating, and sharing her gift with the world.